Well, first of all, we like to talk about what we're thankful for. I'll tell you what I'm thankful for. Look at this amazing assemblage of masculine pulchritude we've managed to put together on this show. This why we don't have a Team MBS calendar, I do not know. But yes, we have done it. We have nailed it. This is the show. This one should be the one we put in our highlight reel, because I am joined not only by Master Gunnery Sergeant over here, or there we go, and diagonally there, right? Of course, my man, my co-host, Brock Vieira, but beneath me, only physically, but never any other way, the one, the only, Mr. Flat Tiger Films, Mr. Velvet, Mr. Steeler Fury, accidental Zen himself, Will Masisak. We are going to dig deep tonight. We're going to go through Rivalry Week, which is always fun and, can mess with the playoffs. And speaking of playoffs, obviously the big playoffs, college football playoffs, but also FCS, Division II, and maybe a little sprinkling of Division III for flavor, right? As we bring it to a boil and enjoy the various melding of the flavors. So I'm very, very excited about today's show for a bunch of reasons. Brock, you seem like a fan of food. Before we dig into the game, let's dig into what we just hopefully enjoyed. How was the feast? How did? And I'm assuming you and your family had a wonderful meal. I'm hoping.
We did. I don't enjoy getting called fat by my co-host, but that's probably the only thing I didn't enjoy in the past 48 hours. The feast was excellent. The turkey succulent, white and dark meat was excellent, which is strange because I've gone to so many places where it's either or if you're lucky. So to have both options was a true joy. I was exposed to a Caucasian Thanksgiving, which is very different from my typical island Thanksgiving in terms of the sides and certain things that come with the meal. My girlfriend's family, whom I love dearly, had a spread of course, turkey, delicious stuffing, may I add, a gravy that I'm not exactly sure how it was put together, but you had a little bit of salt and it was good to go. They had Brussels sprouts, they had asparagus, they had yams with marshmallows on top, which just sounds like a dream for people that combat diabetes, and Hawaiian rolls that were not Hawaiian, and I'm not too sure were rolls. Regardless of that, I had a phenomenal Thanksgiving. The turkey, as I mentioned, was the true gem of the meal. Had multiple plates as always, and I enjoyed my holiday. Unlike some of these teams in college football that did not enjoy a Thanksgiving Thursday or the day after with some of these crazy losses we've been seeing around the country.
Right, exactly. I will ask our Canadian. So, Greg, I know that you actually do celebrate. Tell me about it.
I just did the duck in the turducken, and pecan pie, and that's basically the extent of the meal. I had my cornbread and that was pretty much it.
Well, you had me at pecan pie. That is, now I am a bit of snob is too strong a word. Aficionado. I'm definitely an aficionado. I like my preference is that you have a almost impenetrable crust. Like you have to work for it a little bit, but once you get beneath it, right? Cardi B should sing something about what should happen once you break through that crust. And that brings us, of course, to the one, the only, Mr. Will Masisak. What did you do this year, sir?
I both had the white people food that Brock had. It was served on the table. I didn't actually eat the sweet potatoes with marshmallows, but it's my father-in-law's the number one go-to for him. The thing he looks forward to all year, so he can't be disappointed. And I didn't have any Canadian cornbread, but there may have been some cornbread involved as well. I am enjoying Thanksgiving in our nation's capital, and there was a mixture of a little bit of a Southern flavor to things. I don't know. I am not really. I used to be a giant fan of Thanksgiving, not as much, but we had so many different dishes. I had a bite of turkey. I had some fish. I had some mashed potatoes. I had some cranberry and a couple of side salads. It was Thanksgiving. It's mostly about the families and therefore about how much wine you can consume before dinner.
Nice, nicely done. Nice.
The answer is a significant amount.
What's it people like yams? Like if you don't like yams, you just say it one time and no one talks about it again. If you like yams, it becomes like a conversation starting point every single year. I think that needs to be said. Like stop bringing up yams.
And of course,
marshmallows.
Of course, I absolutely disappointed the boss man Joe Cardozo last night because I posted a photograph of eggnog, which he despises, but I love. Yeah, he
like eggnog.
It's not like eggnog, right? So that was my after dinner treat.
Interesting. I didn't know that about the gentleman. That's surprising. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know it's not for everyone, and I do know some people who say like. I've known someone who I think despise, maybe a stronger term that I've heard used previously. I've known people who are like, it's not their favorite, give me a little bit. Some people find the texture weird. Some people say, I don't like thick liquids, whatever. But if properly made, if you understand the right amount of nutmeg to use, and if you use high quality, once again, I'm like a snob, but it matters. Okay. The nutmeg does matter. I know. It does. It really does. If you better ingredients do give you better nutmeg. I'm sorry. I mean,
okay, Papa John's.
Papa John's nutmeg. Totally. Big fan.
Yes, Papa John's nutmeg. Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
It's gone off the rails, Bill. It hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, it has gone off the rails. It hasn't even started yet. Well, here's the good news. Because Brock, who I was not calling fat at all. I think I'm merely letting it be known that you're a man that enjoys life in general. And as an extension of that, you like to absorb into yourself all the great experiences that you can. And food is just one of them.
Bill, as much as I appreciate your fine tongue and diction, I don't believe you for 1 second. I think I believe in Lane Kiffin to have an undefeated season more than in your words that you just mentioned to me. Now, for all those watching at home, I need to take a brief break because I'm having a second Thanksgiving tonight, and I'm currently roasting a turkey. So please excuse me while I go base.
I expected you to be like you smoke the turkey kind of a guy, I don't see you as really a roaster.
Honestly, though, I was up to me. I would have turkeys 3 different ways if I had the time, money, and space. Oven roasted because I appreciate when it has a nice fine crust. Definitely smoked because how can you not have that nice hickory flavor, right? And then fried, of course, because why not, right? Why not? Nice crispy skin. But sometimes I just want to say this in life, like football, especially offensive football, people go a bit too far, a bit too extreme, like running on 3rd and 1 out of shotgun. There's some things you shouldn't do. Just like some of the
like taking 32 seconds to run a play. When you just need a field goal to tie,
or do this, right? So people should do this, but they don't. Just like some of the garlic parmesan and lemon pepper turkeys I saw. So please stop it. I want you to live to next year. Please stop doing that. But thank you as I go base this bird. I'll be right back, boys.
Yes, sir. And this is a perfect segue into some of the things that we're about to see. So I remember a lot of the sayers of nay saying that what was going to happen is that the SEC was just going to pack the group of 12, the 12, half of them be SEC schools, or 5 of them, or 4 of them, whatever crazy number. And now part of it is that I truly believe that all the things that have happened in college football, while not all of them are positive, most of them have actually helped to restore competitive balance in my mind rather than destroy competitive balance. So I think thus far I'm looking like I might at least temporarily be proven right about that. The SEC does not have a single dominant program, not a single one. They've got a couple of good ones, a couple of ones that are overrated, and then a couple that are right there, they're good. But there's still people trying to push a 3-loss SEC school into. It's not going to this year. No, not this year. You're not going to get away with that this year. And the Big 12.
You're not going to get away with it in the future either. You're not going to get away with 3 losses in the future.
Well, I got news for you guys. You're going to see a 3-loss SEC team in the playoff because I think Georgia just about has a spot locked up. And if they don't lose tonight, they're going to lose next week or the championship game. So I have a feeling that you will see a 3-loss SEC team this year. I don't know about next year, but
Well,
I don't know. I feel like they're a little bit overrated, and they don't play well in big games, but they grind out the wins against other teams. They're sort of like the Pittsburgh Steelers of the SEC.
That hurts because there's some accuracy to it. The thing I'll say, and you're probably right, they'll probably find a way to wedge one in there. But I don't feel like there's a 3-loss SEC school that compels me to say, oh yeah, this is definitely one of the top, 12 teams in the country. I think that they can. Georgia, you mentioned particularly, is capable of beating anybody, right? But they're also capable of losing to a whole long list of people.
Yeah.
If they played Boise on a neutral site and Boise beat them by 10 points, would I be surprised? Slightly, but shocked? No. Nope. Not at all. Not even a little bit. And if they played Pitt on a neutral site and lost by 3, I'd be like, what? I can see that, right?
Sure.
I've watched Georgia a lot, and I've thought, they're good enough, right? But I'm frustrated by the fact that they're going to get more SEC schools than they probably should. But you're right. And if they win the whole thing, I guess I'll look like an idiot. But they have not impressed me particularly. I'll put it that way. Most of the time, Texas A&M to me was as impressive, capable of being as impressive or even more impressive at times than Georgia. Alabama. When's the last time you said this? Wildly inconsistent, right? When's the last time you said that about an Alabama team? Wildly inconsistent.
I could make a case. Someone asked me a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I should say, well, who's the favorite? Because I was like, they said, well, you think Ohio State's going to win it all? And I was like, I don't know if I really love Ohio State. And then I thought, I'm not really sure who's more of a favorite. At this point, either Ohio State or Oregon probably has, is going to be the favorite going in odds wise. But I would say, like, to use a better example from the SEC conversation you were just having, that South Carolina, I think if South Carolina were in the pool, I might place a bet on them because they're definitely the team that could beat anyone in the playoffs, and they could lose to anyone as well, much like Georgia. But I feel like South Carolina, to me, is better than Georgia, but they're not Georgia's prestige as a program, so they're never going to get the sort of the bumped up in the polls the way that you need to get this sort of thing. But I don't know. I feel like that's a 3-loss SEC team that I think could go a long ways in the playoff because there's no dominant team.
Nope. There's nobody I look at and think, oh man, nobody can handle those guys, right? It's going to come down to me to teams getting hot and getting healthy at the right time, right? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be big. Almost anybody who gets into it, I think, could possibly get hot and get healthy at the right time and win it. I worry about the teams where their quarterback play is, doesn't be great, but when it's just when you don't know what it's going to look like from one week to the next. People like to take shots at Jalen Milroe, and for obvious reasons, I get it. But the one thing I'll give him is I kind of know what he's going to do when he gets out there, right? I mean, is he capable of getting hot in the passing game and having a great game throwing the ball? Yes, because we've seen him do it, not even that long ago. But is he capable? But more often, does he look like a guy who is still figuring out touch, anticipation, ball placement? Even though he's had a fair number of starts, there's still a lot of rawness in both the mental and physical part of him putting the football on receivers. So generally speaking, I have a feel for who and what he is, and obviously Indiana got quote unquote exposed, as people like to say, but Indiana and Penn State are still exactly who I thought they were, right? They're sort of different versions of each other. And, I think either one of them is capable of getting hot, not winning at all, but capable of getting hot at the right time and, knocking somebody like Alabama or whoever off or Georgia off, and then getting, wiped out eventually. Oregon, what I'll say about Oregon, not that they don't have weaknesses, right? Because they do. But Oregon's strengths also align well with the weaknesses of all the other teams we just mentioned, right? Their quarterback is unspectacular in most ways, but so efficient, right? How do you beat Alabama? constantly being like 2nd and 2, right? Right, being 2nd and 2 all the time, and that's what Oregon does. 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2. You know, there's games where it seems they only have a handful of third downs the whole game, right? They're just so relentlessly efficient on offense. That's what Oregon sort of has to me over almost anybody else we've named, is they're so ridiculously efficient on offense. Like I said, I'm gonna have to chart to see like how I think they may have had 4 or 5 games this year where they literally had a handful, like 5 or fewer third downs, because they seem to always be at 2nd and 2.
Yeah,
Well,
or maybe you can.
Week one was an exception to that when they played Boise State.
Correct. And Boise State's really good. Like that game looks better and better for Oregon as the season goes along. You know, so as people realize how good hopefully realize how good Boise State is now, you know, they're going to go out and get beat in the Mountain West Championship. And I'm going to look a fool, I guess. But I feel like I said, I don't feel like I'm even exaggerating when I say if they played Georgia or Alabama on a neutral field and beat them by 3 or beat them by 10, I wouldn't be shocked. It wouldn't shock me one bit, not at all. And I know, you know, SEC people will like try to, you know, set me on fire or whatever, but I don't know how much they watch other people play football outside of their conference. And when they watch, if they're able to watch without sort of their SEC colored glasses on. But the SEC as a whole is down this year, right? And I know I say this a lot. I say it many years, but this year I'm right. Right, I know I've said it other years, but
you were correct last year as well, because the Pac-12 was the best conference in football last year.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's
easy. That was easy to see that the Pac-12 gave you much better football games week in and week out, and it was so much clearer than what the SEC puts out there. The SEC. You could think that your little corner of that world that you dominate is all football, but like you said, Bill, they are not. And if this people in the committee separates those two Big Ten and the big SEC 2 schools matching up in the playoffs as they have them right now. Oh, you're going to come up to Ohio State. You're going to come up to Notre Dame to play a game in December. Good luck.
I feel like it should be said, play at Ohio State and play at Notre Dame are 2 varying levels of difficulty. So let's not group in the Fighting Irish with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sort of big on Notre Dame right now, but their defense is solid. Their offense doesn't wow me. Maybe, you know, the efficiency of Oregon's offense made me think a little bit about Miami, or for that matter, the winner of the ACC. Let's say it's Miami or SMU, because either one of them, they're kind of in the same boat. I think that could be sort of an underrated, sort of a dark horse for competing with these teams, because maybe they're not as good on first and second down as Oregon is at getting, you know, avoiding third downs. But Miami's the number 1 third down team in the country. Yeah. They have arguably, in my opinion, inarguably the best quarterback in college football. That goes a long way to winning a big game, because in the pressure situation, at least you have somebody that you can lean on a little bit to make plays that maybe you beat a team that you don't necessarily deserve to beat otherwise. So I think, you know, and I actually really like SMU's team. I think that they're really flying under the wire a little bit. So some of these bigger name programs might get a surprise, an awakening in that first round of the playoffs, facing a team like SMU. You know, especially like SMU at Notre Dame. I'm betting on SMU. Just feels like that's a team that is very well-rounded and is built for something like a playoff experience.
I actually kind of disagree with you a little bit, Will. And before I bring on Jeffery Fann, I just wanted to kind of talk about this because we are talking about ACC. Miami is a team I'm not worried about. I think that the glaring issues with the Hurricanes are going to get exposed during the college football playoffs. I mean, when Cam Ward is under pressure, he starts dancing like it's the 80s and, you know, it's Soul Train on TV. Like, there's no calmness in the pocket. He doesn't deliver the football with any type of accuracy when he's under deep pressure. And unfortunately, he scrambles himself into sacks. I think that if he goes against a team that has a decent enough defensive line, I think that we're going to see him exposed. On the contrary to SMU, I think SMU has a quarterback in Kevin Jennings that doesn't do that. I think it's the ball out a little bit faster. I think he throws it away a little bit more. And more importantly, I think Brett Lashley is a better offensive mind than whatever they got going on at Miami, especially in the clutch. So I think SMU is destined to make a run. I don't think Miami is. I think that we could potentially see the crack start to become even bigger when SMU is supposed to face off against Miami, barring anything crazy in the ACC championship game. I know there's a lot. Jeffrey, you're the ACC guy. What is your thoughts about SMU and Miami potentially?
Yes, here we go.
Their performance in the playoffs.
Here he is, Mr. ACC himself, of Talking ACC Sports, Jeffery Fann, who's going to untangle for us who actually are the best teams in the ACC and how many ACC teams have a chance to make the playoffs.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Got my eyes here on Georgia Tech
Yeah,
trying to pull the upset. 25% of the way there. It's 3-0, and Georgia Tech just stopped Georgia on 4th down. I'll tell you what, before I get into that, you talk about Georgia Tech and Brent Key. He's going to beat Georgia at some point here in the next year or two.
Mhm.
I don't know if it'll be tonight, but he's got Georgia Tech at a level in the last couple of years where they can compete with Georgia at the line of scrimmage. He did it last year, and they're doing it again. They're doing it again so far tonight. And Georgia Tech is a program that I think you need to really keep an eye on in the ACC. They knocked off Miami earlier this year. They got a young freshman quarterback who led the comeback against NC State. I mean, they took a couple losses, this year. They're not a finished product, but Brent Key's got them moving in the right direction. When you get into, the ACC teams looking to get into the playoffs, already talked about Jennings there at SMU. I mean, they're legit. Since that early BYU loss where they were still kind of moving in and out with the quarterbacks, Jennings and Stone. Big gain there by Georgia Tech on that pass play. They've been dynamite, and they had a couple of close calls, but I think they're getting right, and they got Cal at home tomorrow, and I think they'll take care of business, and that's a legitimate team. Miami, on the other hand, they got a really difficult game to go to Syracuse. Kyle McCord and that offense and that Syracuse Fran Brown team, we talked about them. I remember earlier this year. I mean, they're a team that has really surprised people this year. They knocked off Georgia Tech earlier this year in the JMA Dome with a healthy Haynes King, and Miami, as good as Cam Ward and that offense have been, and they've been spectacular. That defense has had issues ever since early in the season. Once they started getting to, into the meatier part of the schedule with the better offenses, they really struggled slowing down Cal most of that game. Louisville had them on the ropes. Virginia Tech, controversial call, had them on the ropes. Georgia Tech with a freshman quarterback and a Haynes King who only could run the ball during that game, ran all over Miami. Now, they showed some pretty good signs against Wake Forest, but Syracuse is a different animal, and that is going to be a really tricky game, I think, for Miami. So I think you have SMU, into the championship game, no problem. I think Miami's got a real test, and then Clemson, who's kind of, they've beaten who they're supposed to beat, but they haven't beaten anyone they weren't supposed to, and actually lost a game they shouldn't have to Louisville. And by not losing to anyone, though, here in the last month, they've kind of backed into the playoffs. And I have an issue with what some of the things that have been said here about Clemson. They're ranked number 12, and everyone's like, oh, why are they ahead of Alabama? Why are they ahead of Ole Miss? Well, we saw Ole Miss here struggle with Mississippi State, but the fact is that, if Clemson loses tomorrow, they're out. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's nothing, no 3-loss Clemson team would even be in the discussion. But they get a pretty good South Carolina team that's ranked in the top 15 on their home field. If you knock them off, ranked number 12, they're in the discussion. And if they get Syracuse to knock off Miami, they'll be in the ACC championship game. And with all those upsets that happened last week, I don't think I see 3 ACC teams getting into the playoffs. But I think there's a pretty fair chance, especially if Clemson knocks off South Carolina. And I do think as well, if Syracuse doesn't pull that upset, and you got Miami and SMU both going into that game with 1 loss, I think the committee has made it pretty clear they're not going to really penalize teams too much for losing in their conference championship game. And I think that's another way that you'll have 2 ACC teams into the playoff. And, what you all said about Georgia getting that 3rd loss in the SEC title game, I have less issue with that than to try to shoehorn an Alabama or Ole Miss in, because then that 3rd loss comes in a title game where I think it should be pretty much across the board that unless it's like an absolute thrashing of a game, an absolute blowout, that getting to your conference championship game should not knock you out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Jeffrey, but I'm looking at the ACC compared to the SEC because we all know that there will be a major bias leaning towards the SEC. And in this, so I'm going to point out a scenario that we could potentially see. I want to get your thoughts on who gets into the playoffs and not in the scenario. Georgia Tech defeats Georgia today. South Carolina defeats Clemson tomorrow. So that would mean that, would you agree with me in that in that case, Clemson would be eliminated from contention if South Carolina beats the Tigers?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So in that scenario, and then obviously, as I mentioned with South Carolina, could we see a scenario where the ACC only gets 2 teams in, and then dependent on what happens in the SEC, which would obviously be what happens between Texas and Texas A&M, and then Georgia loses whoever they face off in the SEC championship game, could we see in this crazy world a scenario where Clemson somehow sneaks back in with a loss, or do you think if they lose tomorrow, they're out for sure?
I think if they lose tomorrow, they'll be out for sure. I don't see a scenario where Clemson can get back in with a loss. Part of the problem, if they had not lost that game to Louisville, maybe there would be a scenario, but Clemson just doesn't have any high-end wins. They just don't have enough high-end wins to make up for a 3rd loss. So I think if they do lose tomorrow, I think they're out. I don't think there's any way they can maintain that spot.
I mean, I think just quickly, the bigger problem that Clemson has is that someone from the Big 12 has to make the playoffs, because right now you got this logjam of teams that all have a pretty good argument hanging around between 10 and 15, but the first Big 12 team is Iowa State at 18. One of those teams that's 18, 19, 20 ranked is going to make it to the playoff. So that means somebody who's even 12th in the poll is not. So for Clemson to lose a game and still end up ahead of the 11th ranked team is going to be pretty hard, because there aren't that many opportunities for the teams ahead of Clemson to lose, other than a championship game, which, as you said, they're probably not going to penalize as much.
Right.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. That kind of led to my second question, which is about the Big Ten. I want to point out this scenario. I want to make this a little bit more clear. South Carolina defeats Clemson, so Clemson's out. Texas defeats Texas A&M, so Texas A&M is out. I'll pull up all the teams in the SEC. Tennessee defeats Vanderbilt, so they're in. Georgia defeats Georgia Tech, so they're in. So at this point, we have, I would say, at least 4 SEC schools right now and within the 12-team playoff. We count the non-automatic qualifier, which is 5. You count Notre Dame, which is 6. And then you count the ACC champion, whoever that would be, SMU or Miami, as 7. Out of those 5, and then the Big 12 champion as well, so essentially 8. So out of those remaining 4 slots, between a 9-3 South Carolina with a win over Clemson, a 9-3 Alabama with a win over Georgia, the winner of the SEC, and then the loser of the SEC championship game, and then you take all those teams and compare them with Miami and the 2nd or 3rd place team in the Big 12, which could potentially be either Colorado, Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, no matter what, they would at least have 3 losses. Do you think that we could see a scenario where one of those Big 12 teams pushes out Miami if they have a really good string of games, if they have a really good performance tomorrow, whomever they face?
Are you talking about a second Big 12 team?
Yeah, and this scenario, could a second Big 12 team leap over Miami if Miami is the eventual loser of the ACC championship game?
No, I don't think so. I think the Big 12 is pretty much locked into just one. They've just taken too many losses here at the end of the year. And Georgia Tech just dropped a touchdown. Yeah, they won't have a better opportunity to score than that. But yeah, anyways, I think the Big 12, just from all the upsets that they had last week, I think there's it would just take an unbelievable number of upsets and chaos for Georgia. For the Big 12 to have more than one team. I think they're locked into one under all scenarios.
What about Indiana? What do you guys think? Does Indiana have an argument? Is there an argument to leave Indiana out in favor of a 2-loss or 3-loss SEC team? Because
no way.
Here's the thing about Indiana. Beautiful season, great season for them. They have no quality wins, 0. So
I would make the argument that Ohio State in 2022, the CJ Stroud year when they lost to Georgia, outside of a Penn State team that played like trash and really got blown out by Michigan, they didn't have a quality win either, and they got into a 14 playoff. So I think that's my argument for why Indiana, if they win, they're in the playoff.
But Indiana would be the 4th Big Ten team, though. That's crazy to me in a way. So defeats the purpose kind of having the playoff. You didn't win your conference. You had a chance to beat Ohio State, and you finished 4th, in your conference. That seems a little bit of a push to me. I hate to say that. I have some very good friends who are Indiana fans, and I respect their season that they've had and what Kurt Signetti's done there. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd make an argument that Indiana is a better playoff team than, even teams that aren't going to make it from the SEC. There's SEC teams who will get left out who are better than Indiana.
Well, I 100% agree with your assessment of Indiana's season and where they lay in the playoff picture. I want to add from my experience is that the committee has already said wins are wins, regardless. Like, you can't be docked for a lack of quality, but essentially what they said. So I think that if they were to leave out Indiana, they would be setting a dangerous precedent, especially for whatever team they put in. Also, the Big Ten has an argument that says if you're going to habitually or annually have at least 4 SEC teams, the SEC only added 2 teams in the restructure, where the Big Ten added 4. So they should automatically get another spot because they play another conference game, compared to a team in the SEC when they're playing Kennesaw State and Mercer towards the end of the season. That's my perspective of something we have no way of knowing, because the people that make these standings never have logic or sense or consistency or
Okay, hear me out on this. How about a 4-team playoff in the Big 10 or the SEC? In a way, that would make a better case for their teams getting the best teams getting into the playoffs. Maybe they need to go to an extra playoff game for their championship. It's an extra game that nobody is going to want to have the injury risk. But on the other hand, if you have that many teams in your conference, it's really rough to not even have. They don't even have divisions. They're not even playing the same teams. The other teams, like Clemson, SMU, and Miami, didn't have any common opponents, did they? So
Louisville.
Or they had common opponents.
Louisville.
They didn't play each other. You got 3 teams in the conference that didn't play each other. Is what I meant to say. So anyway, maybe they just need to play each other more.
Yes, there we
go.
That's
definitely a one of the negatives of these gigantic conferences now. Even if you expand to 9 conference games, these 16, 17, 18 team leagues, are really leaving a lot, out there, evaluate. You look at, I think we all can say, Texas is a top 5 team if we feel like that. But when you look at their resume through the course of the year, it was one of the easiest schedules out there. Indiana seems to be the one that takes the most grief having a light schedule until they played Ohio State. But when you look at Texas, I mean, they did not play the kind of schedule like Georgia did, for example, or Alabama, and so they can lose, to Texas A&M, and they're still going to, be in position to make the playoffs and have not beat a single team that's going to be, ranked. So yeah, evaluating these teams, we can kind of look at it and say, oh well, they have a great recruiting class, or they got a stockpile with all these NFL players, but you really don't know. And it's not even fair to look at it until you see them on the field playing against other highly ranked teams. And then that's just been the drawback to these gigantic conferences. And one of the reasons why I think realignment might be a little bit more on hold than some people suspect, because these mega gigantic conferences are not good for anyone.
Yeah, but you're going to get rid of the SEC and the Big Ten. It's going to all be into one major conference with like 40 schools involved, and that's going to be it.
Yeah. Now that scenario, if it does play out, yeah, that'll be interesting, especially with all the other NCAA rules going on out there about who wants to be part of paying $20 million to the funds, and which schools want to take part in that and which don't. I mean, I think that's definitely on the table of a break off of the top 40 football brands.
Well, and there's lots to be said and written about that. So it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, Jeffrey, you think that SMU, if they do what they're supposed to do, take care of business, make it a championship game, win or lose, they're in. Miami, if they take care of business, make it the championship game, and win or lose, they're in. Clemson, do they need to win the championship, or if they just get there, even if they lose, are they also in, Jeffrey?
Yeah, that gets. I think Miami is in the best position if they make it, since they're ranked number 6. I think SMU probably stays in the playoff even with a loss, but it gets a little bit dicier, because then you're looking at results from other parts of the country. Then you get into where if they drop one spot, what happens in some of these other games. So I think SMU really wants to win the title to make sure they're in, even though I think they're probably in. Clemson beating South Carolina and then losing in the ACC championship would be quite an interesting scenario. I think they could possibly stay in, but I wouldn't take my chances if I were Clemson. It actually might be better for them to beat South Carolina and root for Miami to get to the title game so that they don't get that third loss, because even beating South Carolina is probably only going to move them up, maybe 2-3 spots. I just think this expanded playoff, I don't hope they don't mess with it, because it's just brought in so many scenarios and so many, permutations of what can happen, that I'm really looking forward to it. And you've got so many teams now still in play. Basically, though, I think it comes down to, if you win for Miami, if you win and you take care of business, you're in. If you're SMU and you win, you take care of business, you're in. If you're Clemson and you win and you get into the ACC title game and you win that game, you're in. And so if you don't make it into the playoffs, no matter what happens, even if the committee is doing something you don't think is fair, you have no one to blame at the end of the day but yourself.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. So we've moved all the checkers around in various places, or chess pieces around various places on the board. Of all the ACC schools, Jeffrey, which one do you think has the best opportunity, if it does make the playoffs, to actually end up playing for a championship?
I think you probably have to still go with Miami, because I think they have the most national championship caliber unit of SMU and Clemson, because of Cam Ward. As good as Jennings is in that offense of SMU, the Miami offense with Restrepo, with Martinez in the backfield, with Cam Ward, I mean, they have elite talent on that offense. and maybe they could go on a LSU type run where they just ride that offense through the playoffs. Even though I think Miami's defense is quite a bit more suspect than LSU's was back then, that was still a little bit of an open point for the Tigers. If there was a team I think could potentially, win some high scoring battles, it would be Miami. Even with that defense, I think Clemson is just not dominant on either side of the ball for one reason or another. Even though they're pretty talented, I think when they match up with another team that's equally as talented as them, I don't see them being able to win, multiple games to take it all. And I think SMU, if they're playing like a Georgia and then an Ohio State, it's tough to be able to see them knocking off both of those. So if it's going to be one of them, I think it might be Miami. But even that is a stretch. But that's the one who might have the best shot at it.
Okay. Got it. So before we sort of move on to the next step in our discussion, Brock, how's the bird looking? Everything doing what's supposed to do?
Bird is looking good. We are currently in the slow roasting portion of it. And then in about half hour, I'm going to give it another base, another inject. And then I'm going to turn down the oven a little bit, put a nice little foil on it, let it bake from the inside. Then we're going to high blast the outside skin to get it nice and crispy. Let it rest, and then it should be ready to roll.
There we go. That's what I like to hear. If only Dabo Swinney had a similar recipe for success. So let's take a look at
profit off the backs of unpaid people. No, that's a different type of success. Oh, sorry. Was that too much for our final regular season show of the season? Was that a tad bit too much?
Tough room.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. I could say that you're not wrong. So we talked about obviously a bunch of scenarios and permutations and things that could all align or misalign or whatever. So what will happen, obviously, will somehow still be different from what all of us anticipate, because that's always what happens. I want to spend a little bit of time on what I get at this point, Boise State, I guess is what it is. The guest at the table, the non Power 5 or Power 4 or Power 4.2, I guess, whatever it is, school. In this case, Boise State. Obviously, if Army runs the table, they'll be the undefeated team that gets to talk about how they get their share of the national championship or whatever. They get to win the UCF award or whatever you want to call it. But I just want to sort of go around. I have been a person who says I believe in Boise. I don't know how everybody else feels. I'll start with you, Greg.
I am a huge believer in the Boise State Broncos. As you know, I live out here in the West. I understand Mountain West football. And to see this conference not get the credit that it deserves drives me bananas, and it has for years. Yep. The Boise State Broncos are just a damn good football team.
Correct.
Their one loss was to Oregon in week 1 by a field goal. It was not as this, Big Ten team coming in and stomping on these guys. No. And I don't care who Boise State goes up against in these playoffs. They are going to be a tough team to match up against because they play very well defensively. And of course they do have Mr. Genty in that backfield as well, who just, he is just destroying teams. Absolutely destroying them.
Yeah. He had a light 226 today, which the crazy thing is it didn't even look that impressive. Like we reached the point with him where he goes with 226 and you feel like, really? Like it's like when Greg Maddux will pitch a one-hitter, but you feel like, like guys were looking good they're getting good looks, right? Guys are, they're hitting stuff to the warning track. They feel good about their at-bats, but one hitter. So he goes for 286. It just looks like he just had an average day at the office. we'll see what happens, obviously, with the Heisman and his career to follow. But he's a ludicrously impressive college football player. And I thank you for mentioning they're not a one-man band. They have a really good secondary. They have I'm going to say it, they have an SEC level secondary. That is a really good secondary. If you put LSU uniforms on those guys, people are talking about those. Half the guys in their secondary being talked as top 50 prospects. The other half being talked as top 200 or 150 prospects. I mean, all the draft eligible guys in that secondary will be talked about. Like I said, if you drop them at LSU or Florida or Texas or wherever, pick a place amongst the power, whatever, they're going to be talked about as no doubters. At least one or two of those guys is no doubt, top 50. And then, like I said, even the other guys are talked about as mid-round prospects. Their offensive line is very good. They've got guys on defense at every level of the defense who have pro potential. And for me, the big question mark was quarterback. And when their quarterback plays even slightly above average football, they're hard to beat, man. That's a hard team to beat. When they get even slightly above average quarterback play, I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. You're going to struggle with Boise State. If Max Madsen, whatever, put his name in whatever order you want.
Max Madsen, Mad Max, yeah,
all those things. You put him out there. Yes, Jeffrey. Thank you for keeping your demeanor pretty much under control throughout this. I too am rooting for them to win, but
we have a situation brewing in Athens.
Well, I'm telling you what I'm seeing in this Georgia game is Haynes King is throwing the ball at the Georgia Bulldogs right down the middle, and that means that Javon Walker, this great linebacker that we keep hearing about here, he's getting beat up because he's been looking pretty shaky so far.
Well, no fear in the Georgia Tech game plan so far.
None. Georgia Tech does not come out trying to respect you with their game plan. That is not what they come out to do. They are here. They're here to find out just how much you love to play football. Old football, the punch you in the ribs style of football. Because if you're not into that, you're not going to enjoy a game against Georgia. Georgia Tech is one of the most tough and physical teams I've seen. Pick it anywhere. Period. Right? I mean, they're not fun to play against.
The only week I did not see Georgia Tech come out and play hard and like at an opponent was the Notre Dame game. That was the only one.
Yep, they were a little bit overwhelmed in that game. Haynes King wasn't available, but that was probably the only one where they got a little bit overwhelmed out of the gate. And they were still within a score late into the second half there, but they were definitely off center on that game for sure.
That's a tough defense to play, I think, especially if you get behind. That speaking of secondaries, that is at top level. That's one of them.
If you don't throw the ball well, you're in trouble. Like you need to be able to do both things at a high level, and you can only do one thing at a high level against a team like Notre Dame, and they're extremely well coached on defense. But I wanted to touch on a little bit the teams that won't get to be there, but you think might deserve it. Somebody mentioned that there are some SEC schools. I guess I'll go back down to Will. There are some teams that won't get there. Who would you like if you had given the magical power to put a team or two into the field of 12? Who would it be for you, Will?
Yeah, it's absolutely South Carolina. I don't know what happened to them in that LSU game. I think that's the difference between them being in the playoff and not. And I thought that was a game, if I recall correctly, that they seemed to have well in hand and lost somehow. And that just feels like the difference. That's a loaded team. Like I think maybe when we look back at when the draft comes around, they'll be the team that you say, how can they have all these guys in the top of the draft who were excellent prospects and they didn't make it to the playoff? We'll be trying to figure that out. So that's an easy call for me. And beyond that, it's more like I'm just not sure that there isn't that necessarily the 12 best teams are going to get in, but that's the way they like it. They like there to be some controversy, I guess, about the teams that make it in. I mean, I don't know that Tennessee is going to make it in, but that seems like an interesting team to get in.
Right.
I guess we're going to find out. South Carolina for me though is easily the team I'd like to see in.
Same question for you, Brock. Who, if you had the magical power to drop one team in there, who would you, or maybe two, but who would you put in?
I would go with a little bit different answer. I want to go the Illinois Fighting Illini. I think this is a team that's extremely well coached. They're very tough defensively. And you start looking at the schedule, the losses aren't exactly too bad. I mean, definitely the Minnesota loss is a bad one, but Minnesota had a very underrated season this year. But you start looking, the other losses are to number 9 Penn State at Happy Valley, and then to Oregon in Eugene. So their resume isn't exactly like awful. It's actually pretty good. Unfortunately, because they have 3 losses, they're not in the SEC, or they don't have that signature victory. We can't really elevate them. But when you look at the teams, I mean, Altmaier is a pretty decent quarterback that has a very solid rushing attack. Brett Bielema has been known to get teams into places they're not supposed to be. And, you know, Brett Bielema wins games you don't expect him to win. So I think if they were to get into the dance against a team that may not be as tough physically, I think that they can make some major noise in the playoffs and potentially make the quarterfinals if they were to be included.
Yeah. The Minnesota game was pivotal. They don't have enough sizzle to make up for that. Like they entered the year with very little sort of buzz around the program, and just conceded to be better than most people expected. And I'm going to say this: I am a person that has a master's degree from Illinois. I was a graduate assistant there, but they're a boring football team, a good boring football team. They're a boring football team. Yeah. There's nothing where you go, ooh, right? We don't have the Brown brothers. There's nothing really. There's no Devin Witherspoon. There's a bunch of good football players. So nobody that makes you go, nobody makes your heart really go pitter pat as like a talent evaluator. Good players, guys are going to play 5, 6, 7 years in the NFL. But nobody that makes you just clutch your pearls as a talent evaluator. So they have done it the sort of old-fashioned, boring, like I said, way. They have Altmaier is, when he's at his best, essentially a game manager. And their running game is, what's the word I'm looking for? Basic, right? I think is the word I'm looking for. A lot of very familiar concepts for people that have watched Brett Bielema every other place he's been as a coach. It's like, oh, hey, look at that GT counter. Look at that. I mean, it's all the stuff he's always done every place he's ever been. And, pin and pull, right? There's nothing that makes you go gaga about what they do. But yes, if they beat Minnesota, they would then, I think, be one of those teams that could legitimately be complaining about not making it in. But yes, with that loss, as you said, they're not in the SEC. There's no argument to be made. Same question for you, Greg.
Well, if I could spin my Notre Dame magic on to that Fight On bunch that we're going to destroy tomorrow, I would have liked to have seen Fight On be a better team this year in the Big Ten. Because of course, you know, it's a joy to watch them lose in the playoffs as well. Because I'm a Notre Dame guy. I know I'm going to lose. I'm not going to be the national champion.
I got it. Okay.
You know,
misery loves company. I get it.
That's right. That's right.
That is the truth.
Yeah, I will say this much. I understand why they wanted to be in the Big Ten. I just feel like it's not a great fit for them, but whatever. They'll fight through it because, you know, money. But I really feel like if they'd been the one team, the one big brand that stayed in the, well, I guess they couldn't just stay in the Pac-3, but I think it would have actually benefited them in the long run, both in terms of dominating West Coast recruiting, right, being the last big brand left amongst the West Coast programs, and just, you know, not having to go play all those darn Big Ten schools in Big Ten weather. I get the money decisions, the business decisions, but that as a football decision, woo, that was a questionable call.
But I mean, they all left because of that horrible TV deal. I mean, it was a horrible deal, and that was,
I get it.
That was the bottom line of that. So they knew that they were going to make more money by going out to the Big Ten. That's you know, and again, they're going to be one of those 40 schools that will put in their $20 million a year for the NIL guys, and they'll survive.
Yeah,
You're right.
I wrote last year about the future or lack thereof of the Big 12, Pac-12. Sorry, Pac-12 last year on Team MBS Media, and I talked about that deal in detail and the machinations and the people getting fired and all kinds of stuff that happened because of it. But like I said, there's a part of me that is very much a cold-eyed capitalist. There's a part of me that's still that, 4.5-year-old kid falling in love with Johnny Rogers. So there's both things going on inside of me at the same time. And some of it just feels wrong to me when I see these schools that just don't, quote unquote, belong in certain places. But what does belong is a little talk about, I'm going to ask a couple more questions of Jeffrey, and then we'll let him continue to will those sturdy Rambling Wrecks to victory. But I'll start with you, Will. Do you have any more questions for Jeffrey about the ACC before we transition to your bailiwick?
You did ACC make any kind of overtures to try to get Notre Dame in the ACC for football? Because I think really Notre Dame is the big winner of all this realignment. But I'm wondering if it seems like I'd almost be, if I were one of the if I were the Big Ten or the ACC or even the Big 12. I don't think I would schedule Notre Dame. I would try to get out of that deal with them because you're basically handing them an opportunity to take one of your teams out of the playoffs. And I'm wondering how you feel about that relationship that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Notre Dame has an open invitation to join the ACC anytime they want. But I mean, one thing I really truly respect about Notre Dame is, their independence. It's one of the last bastions of kind of purity in college football, and they're gonna hold on to that to the very last second. Of course, the ACC would take them with open arms. Anything Notre Dame would want to do if they wanted to schedule more with the ACC, and there's actually a little bit of a discussion with the look-in agreement that maybe there could be another ACC Notre Dame game on the docket. We'll see if that really happens. As far as them actually joining, I think any chance of that probably went out the window with Florida State and Clemson suing the ACC. And if I'm Notre Dame, excuse me, I'm not, probably gonna, take a chance on that kind of instability. But as far as maybe another game, if they ever did want to join, it would be open. Sorry for the last part of your question. You were talking about scheduling with the Big 12.
Why do those conferences schedule Notre Dame when it really just benefits Notre Dame getting a high ranking? Whereas, without they're basically costing the big conference teams a slot.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the ACC's point of view, one of the all right, first down here for Georgia Tech on 3rd and 10, but I think they have the same thought process as a lot of the ACC. Many people wondered why would the ACC make such an agreement with Notre Dame, but a couple of the things when Notre Dame comes to your arena, that for one thing, the ticket sales are massive. Places that very rarely sell out have sellouts with Notre Dame. When they played Georgia Tech, they were able to play the game in the Mercedes-Benz zone. The stadium there, it had like 60,000 people for a Georgia Tech game. It's typically going to be on national TV as well. And I think those are the kind of things that they look at as a benefit of playing Notre Dame, even with the likelihood you're going to lose because they are a really good program. Those ticket sales, that notoriety, that extra coverage that you wouldn't always get. And from an ACC point of view, that's definitely the kind of the thing they looked at. They also were able to get an enhanced bowl agreement by having Notre Dame as part of that for the non-playoff bowls.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The money, man. They make more money by scheduling Notre Dame.
Yep.
One of the things that when the ACC essentially agreed to be essentially side chick status with Notre Dame, and seemed to be willing to be, essentially satisfied with that. Part of it is because, as we mentioned, the Notre Dame has enough cachet and independence, literal independence, and the actual not being a conference, but also their special deal that they have television-wise gives them financial independence. That, I mean, even Texas. I mean, name a USC, Texas, Michigan. Like nobody else has that, right? Nobody else has that situation. BYU was an independent for a long time, but they didn't have the financial part of it, so it made sense for them to eventually join a conference, and it actually has helped them. I believe. I think it's helped BYU. But
and next season, Notre Dame only plays USC and Purdue from the Big Ten next year. They do play. They will play Texas A&M and Arkansas for the SEC.
Right.
They play Boise State. They open their season against the Hurricanes, but they finish off their year. They go to Boston College. They play the Wolfpack, and I don't believe the Syracuse Orange game will be at Notre Dame. I think that'll become the Shamrock Bowl game for them, and then they go out to Pitt.
Got it.
So I'll throw a curveball at you guys. What if Michigan beats Ohio State tomorrow? How's that shake up the playoffs?
If Michigan beats Ohio State?
Yeah.
Wait, did you just make Grace say the name out loud?
I know. I can't even believe it.
I know. I didn't refer to them as that school up north. I would respect that program if they went out and beat Ohio State tomorrow, but I just don't see that happening.
Well, it's not about if you see it happen or not. It's what would happen if it happened.
If they did, then that's two conference losses for Ohio State. And that really would put Penn State in against Oregon for the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, and it probably hurts Indiana as well.
Yeah, I'm just saying, what if like Vandy beats Tennessee tomorrow? Like I'm just saying, I think there's a bunch of upset alerts. If this Georgia Tech score holds, that we could see a drastic shift in the playoff picture where teams can get. I'm just saying. If Georgia Tech beats Georgia, Clemson beats South Carolina, and Vanderbilt beats Tennessee, all results that are legitimately possible, how does that shake things up? Do we see a late push from another team to get in? Do we see those teams lose out? I mean, because I can make the argument if I know we're all going to hate for me to say it, but there will always be a part of that conversation at Alabama point where they can say, hey, we have 3 losses, but look at Georgia, a team that we beat. They lost to us, they lost to Georgia Tech, and they lost to Ole Miss. So why would they be in over us? I'm just saying that's a scenario that they could potentially put out there. And then for those that are saying, well, they had the win over Texas, we go back to say who has Texas beaten this season. Just throwing that out there.
And just don't forget, Texas A&M can easily beat the Longhorns tomorrow. They can easily beat the Longhorns. Especially if Quinn Ewers is not healthy, which he's not.
Yes.
If only they had another quarterback.
Yeah, I don't remember that kid's name though. I don't. What's his name? Arch. His last name. And it's now 16-0 for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
It's not Peyton Manning. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not Eli either.
No, I mean it's not Peyton. Peyton, not Peyton. Peyton.
Oh, okay. Yes.
It's also not Archie Manning, who was overrated. Just saying.
Archie Manning suffered from going to that place he played in the NFL. There's no. I mean, he was the captain of the Aints for so long there, and they were such a horrible team.
That could ruin anyone's mojo for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like being Tony Romo or Dak Prescott for the Cowboys. Your career's already over because you're in Dallas, and
So Brock, should we move down a level in playoff talk while we're all here?
I think so.
How about this? I want to put this scenario out for you guys. UNLV is set to play Nevada on Saturday, and the reason why I mentioned
there you go. One more scenario.
of course, the Rebels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we move on, UNLV obviously will play Nevada tomorrow, and if they win, they're into the Mountain West Championship game. UNLV has 2 losses. Boise State, of course, has 1. Tulane just picked up a loss on Thursday, which placed them to 3. If UNLV then defeats Boise State in the college football playoff, who gets in? In the Mountain West Championship game, hypothetically, who would get in as a non-Power 5 automatic qualifying bid? UNLV with a conference championship win over Boise State with a regular season win over UNLV and less losses on the season, if I'm not mistaken, or might be tied. No, tied. I apologize for the same amount of losses. Or could we see Army at 1 loss get in, considering that the Navy game for some reason doesn't count towards, their status?
Oh no,
so even if they lose,
Tulane. Tulane would be the higher ranked team because they're going to play Army in their championship.
But Tulane will have 3 losses.
I know.
So would UNLV at 2 losses getting over Tulane?
That's a possibility. It's a possibility.
I just thought
I think Boise State might still.
Sorry, continue.
I was going to say I think Boise State might still get in that scenario, even if they lose their championship. Oh no, it has to be the championship team has to get in. So yeah, that really hurts them.
Yeah.
UNLV would have a pretty good chance, I guess. Yep. It's just grim otherwise.
I'm just saying, so because everyone automatically assumes Boise State's going to get in, which is a fair assumption considering how they played this year. But we also watched them struggle in Laramie 2 weeks ago, or last week, I apologize. So just throwing that out there. But yeah, we can move a little bit down the list. So the Big 12, I think, is the conference you should wrap this up with because they have the most amount of scenarios in terms of playoffs. Colorado just beat up Oklahoma State today 52-0 to finish their season at, I believe, 9-3 with 2 conference losses, 1 against Kansas State and then 1 last week against Kansas. There's 3 other teams that have 2 conference losses, which is BYU, Arizona State, and Iowa State. Iowa State is set to play Kansas State. BYU, I'm not sure they're set to play. Looking up right now. Houston. So that should be an easy one for them. And then Arizona State's set to play Arizona for the Territorial Cup. Colorado would need at least multiple teams to lose for them to get in. So with that all being said, who are your 2 teams that you think are going to make it to the Big 12 championship game?
Tough one.
I've got Arizona. I've got Arizona State going.
Yeah, they all they have to do is win against Arizona, which is not the rivalry game, so you can't really put that in pen rather. Put it in pencil. But I would think BYU has the best chance to get there.
Yeah,
and Colorado certainly would like to make its case, but I'm not sure they can make it there with 3 losses.
Not with the 2 conference losses. They can't. No.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm just saying, it's Arizona State beats Arizona. It's going to be Arizona State and probably BYU. So
BYU.
So, but Iowa State, it's Iowa State's the highest ranked, which is funny. Is Iowa State, if they beat Kansas State, I think maybe they actually would jump over BYU, but I'm not positive how that works in their conference. I don't know, maybe someone more familiar than I am, but that's what a rough situation to be this close to being in the championship game.
That turns into the ASU versus Iowa State championship game. That's what would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, they're having their mini playoff there, just like I said they should in the other conferences, right? Get it all down at the end.
So that's
also. Sorry, continue, Bill.
No, I was saying Will's solution is always to add another round of playoffs.
That's honestly not a bad solution.
Right.
Well, within the conferences, especially, because then it simplifies things. It's like you're getting the best teams out of here, for sure. But yeah, I don't know if this Big 12 can really do anything. But I would just say it's their own fault for having too many teams.
I agree. I honestly would prefer an 8-team playoff, but with a little bit of a amendment. All the Power 5 conferences, or I guess Power 4 now, they all have a 4-team playoff within the conference, and the conference champion goes to the playoffs. You have one conference championship game for the G5 conferences, and then you pair G5 conferences against each other in terms of ranking, and the winner of that game goes to the playoff. And then you will be able to somehow come up with 8. Then before you have 4 bowl games, semifinal, and of course the final. So that's just my idea to throw out there to people trying to figure this all out.
Love it, Brock. More football, buddy. I'm down.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
But the one problem is that Notre Dame would be like, how are we just supposed to get in? And I'm not too sure.
This is my point exactly about Notre Dame's situation is they're just laughing at the teams in the Big 12 right now.
Right.
That could have been us.
Anybody have any final questions for Jeffrey?
Man, go enjoy. You only get these chances to enjoy so many times.
So I'm going to ask Jeffrey to tell everybody what he's up to, where they can find his work and follow him, and then I will allow him to go back to dragging, pushing and willing, giving all his all as a fan and as a graduate to getting that sturdy Yellow Jacket / Georgia Tech team to a well-deserved victory. Tell people what you're working on, where they can follow your work, Jeffrey. And you have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Oh, yeah. You can find me at allsportsdiscussion.com, where we are blogging on ACC sports. You find me on Twitter, X at Talkin' ACC Sports. That's TALKIN ACC Sports. I'm going to hopefully enjoy this second half, but I'm scared of Georgia. I know what they did. They had a similar half against Alabama and, came back like crazy and almost won that game. So I know this is a long way from over, but that first half was a lot of fun. I hadn't seen one like that against Georgia in a long, long time.
Yes.
Maybe I should stay on the show. I was saying that earlier if it's going to go this well.
Well,
all right.
Well,
thanks so much.
You can come back on. You can come
I was
back
going
on.
to say, first of all, we would love to have you, but we just know that you are part of you has traveled to another destination already. So we were simply allowing you to make a full transition. But if you want to hang out, we would never, ever, ever tell you not to because you're one of our favorites. Like I said.
Thanks so much for having me. Enjoyed it as always.
The pleasure is mine. And we will definitely have to have at least one more visit as the playoffs do begin.
Yeah, and college basketball gets going.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yes. Tar Heel born and a Tar Heel bred. When I die, but a Tar Heel dead. So we'll talk about that at some point as well.
Watch out for the Pitt Panthers. Early season ACC surprise this year. Pitt.
What a win! What a win in Ohio State.
Exactly. That was a monster
shot to win it.
Yeah. With like 0.7 seconds left, 3-pointer to win at Ohio State. That one's going to resonate for a while.
Yes. Well enough too.
As long as Puke U doesn't get anywhere near the ACC title game, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I can't stomach that place. I'm a Tar Heel man. I always have been since Dean Smith was there, and that's the Chapel Hill deserves to live. That place that Puke U calls home needs to become a waste dump.
Cooper
Flag.
Cooper
I guess we've reached the moment.
Thanks,
the
everyone.
moment in the show where I must make the disclaimer. While I do not disagree at all with the points made by Greg, I must, however, point out that they do not reflect the policies, the beliefs, or the culture we're building at Team MVS Media. But it does.
You do have a sponsor that is the Toxic Waste. So
yeah, exactly.
Different. It's on brand.
And if you were in our Hoops chat room and you would see the response that the boss man has towards Puke U, it agrees with me.
Okay.
Yes. No, I'm very aware of. I mean, once again, in fact, the first time I ever saw college sports was in Chapel Hill. I lived there we moved there when I was 3, and I lived there from 3 through 6. So I got to see Don McCauley go nuts on NC State for something like 224 yards in a game. I got to see, Mitch Kupchak, right, in his days as a player. I got to see Phil Ford in his days as a player. But yes, I am very much a fan. But let's move on. there's other playoffs to be had beyond the. Yes, I know.
Where are these things? What?
Yeah, so it's funny. Like I said, I remember, back when we were debating, all the raging debates at the sites where I was writing for at the time about whether or not you could actually have playoffs. It's like, well, I mean, what are we debating? Because I just watched college football playoffs in the last several years. It clearly can be done. But there is, I mean, this is a great weekend for those that like sports because there's a lot of them. And I think a lot of things we said about there not being a single, team you could definitely say, oh, this team is definitely the best. That may be definitely even more true or equally true at the FCS level. The FCS playoffs are going to be fascinating, or at least in my mind, they're going to be fascinating. There's 2 or 3 teams that are fantastic and could take it all, but none of them are slam dunks to me. None of them are teams where it's like, oh, I can't see this team losing a game in the playoffs. And I think this is one of those years where you can't just pencil in, the best team in the Mountain West versus the best team in the CAA or the best team in Missouri Valley Conference. I could see a team that's sort of an out-large team or a team that lost a couple of games early in the season and sort of stumbled out of the box, hitting their stride and winning it all. But I'll start with you, Greg, because as you point out, you do live we do live on the other side of the Great Plains. But I guess the closest American college teams to you are those teams that are in the Big Sky, I'm assuming.
Yep. They are the teams that are closest to me is the Big Sky Conference. It's going to be an interesting season to see how this shapes out. Ferris State is a team that I'm highly interested in seeing.
There's a lot to see there. Okay, so Ferris State. That's of course they won a Division II national championship not that long ago.
Yep,
and they've put a couple of guys in the NFL also. Who was the kid? They moved him to offense, but he was a defensive tackle, a terrific defensive tackle in college, and really powerful and athletic. Oh my, Justin, what was his last name? But
you're talking about the pass rusher they had there? I don't know which one you're talking about.
He was remember what was his name? He was a D tackle, but he could rush the pass. He was a double digits.
Caleb Murphy, is that what we're talking about?
Well, Caleb Murphy was a true edge guy, but they had a couple years.
That's the guy I was thinking of.
They had the Bills brought him as a prior undrafted free agent, but moved him to offensive guard for reasons to this day I'll never understand. But I mean, incredibly powerful, violent, small, like undersized, well, sort of undersized, but like powerful as all get out. Oh, well, doesn't matter. The point is that Ferris State's a good
Justin
program.
Zimmer is the answer to your question.
Thank you. Oh my God, it was killing me. Yeah. But yeah, I've had that kid on my show. I thought he was terrific. And I still to this day don't know why they said, oh yeah, let's take this incredible defensive tackle and turn him into a so-so rotational guard. Yeah. I'll never, ever understand why, whatever. Sometimes a player is what he is. I
mean, since we're on to D2, I would say, as I said, I've said this probably 15 times on shows this year, that's the GLAC, right? The conference that Ferris State plays in Division II.
Yeah.
That's an amazing. I think the quality of football there might be better than your average FCS conference. That's not the Big Sky. They have a lot of talented guys there, and they recruit heavily. Transfers and things like that. So I feel like Ferris State is really battle tested, and there are some really good teams in D2, but and until someone beats Ferris State, I'm going to say they're the favorite. They play. They play the Harlan Hill likely. Well, they play the Harlan Hill winner this week Zach Zabrowski, quarterback for Central Missouri, which is a really great matchup. That's a tough. That is a tough draw for Central Missouri.
That I was going to say. People are being battle tested. That they'll get their There's CIB practically after
Isn't
this.
isn't that Central Oklahoma?
Oh, sorry, I say Central Oklahoma, wrong.
Yeah,
Central.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, they got Central Oklahoma right out of the box, right? And
So
Central
what is
Oklahoma,
that?
we just
Central Missouri. Sorry, I'm trying to. I thought that they were the team playing Ferris State, but maybe not.
It's going to be Central Oklahoma or Cheetah Baptist who goes.
Well, the Central Oklahoma took out Wichita
Won.
Baptist.
Yeah, they won the game.
Yeah.
Grand Valley State.
Grand Valley
of course,
State.
is always we talk about the GLIAC and Grand Valley State.
Yeah.
I remember watching Matthew Jude on there. They're always a handful. Harding, it seems to always have 2 or 3 players that I really, really love. And so in this upcoming round, Grand Valley State and Harding, I think both those, whoever survives that is a team that could see making it all the way to a championship game, except for Ferris State. That'd be the reason that might not be. If not for Ferris State being in their draw, I could see either Harding or Grand Valley State making a run. On the other side, you've got, cuts down and slippery walk. Speaking of rivalries, right? It was rivalry week. Both Cuts Down and Slippery Rock know each other well, right?
Yep.
They
do indeed.
Yes. And then you've got Cal PA versus Ashland.
Yep.
I love all those games. Slippery Rock, once again, usually has 1 or 2 players that will definitely be in NFL camps every year. Ashland even had a guy drafted, an offensive tackle, a few years back. Well, oh my gosh. I can picture the kid in my mind. Once again, super athlete. Was it the Raiders who drafted him? I can't remember who drafted, but they had. I think he was the first player drafted in the history of their program a few years ago. Was an offensive tackle. Cal PA, the Vulcans, year in year out, put guys in Steelers camps and other camps as well. Maybe not drafted, but there'll be somebody in their camp. They're all good matchups, obviously, but I think these are especially good matchups. Central Oklahoma is going to give Ferris State a run for their money. They may not win, but it won't be an easy game. I wouldn't be shocked if Harding as good as Grand Valley State is, I wouldn't be shocked if Harding upset them. They're very balanced and dangerous. Cal PA, I think, will take out Ashland. And then Cuts Down Slippery Rock.
I don't know. Ashland, that's a good matchup, I think.
That's right. It's a good matchup. That's what I'm saying. That's the point I'm making. Like, even the ones where I think I know who might win, I won't be shocked if I'm wrong on every single one of these. Because they're all really evenly balanced.
It's fun to get to see a little bit more of these teams that can do in the playoffs. During the regular season, it's hard to get to see a lot of D2 or D3 football, but the year is great though. And I think, I don't know, speaking for myself, the reputations of the programs almost supersede, what they did this year or not. I feel like when they get into the playoffs, it's likely that the teams that are always good are going to be good again. Like we, talk about D2, it'll be, the same 3 or 4 teams every year are competing in the semifinals, it seems like. So it's definitely a level where it helps to be one of those big programs. And the FCS is not really so different these days.
No, here's the thing I'll say about the FCS playoffs this year. This is another one where I think there's going to be 1 or 2, upsets. I think there's going to be 1 or 2 upsets somewhere mixed in. I think that you're going to see, like I said, there were years where it's like, well, who's the best team in the CAA, or who's the best team in the, Big Sky or Missouri Valley, and then you'd sort of see where they are, and you might see somebody that might be dangerous, but usually you would just say, well, it's going to be one of those 2 or 3 teams. But I could see this being a year where it's not that simple, or it's not that easy. North Dakota State is still very good. Yep. And shout out to Mercer, right? A couple of years ago, Mercer went from being kind of a, opponent. Now Mercer's legit. Like if Mercer beats North Dakota State, well, I'll be surprised, sure. But I still think it could happen. Idaho, former FBS program, is back in FCS where it belongs. They're a team that I won't be surprised at all. If they make it all the way to the championship game, wouldn't surprise me. Montana State obviously was one of the fun programs, from recent years, partially due to Touchdown Tommy. UC Davis, if you like teams that run the ball down your throat, and they can throw it too, don't get me wrong, but UC Davis has a terrific running attack. Incarnate Word, right? Even without Cam Ward, still super fun to watch. Yes, even without Cam Ward, still super. I mean, that's where I first fell in love with Cam Ward, is an Incarnate Word, but they're still a really good program. They have a lot of speed. I don't know if there's a faster FCS program just going position by position in FCS football. Incarnate Word has a lot of really good athletes who could play lots of places. Some of those guys will lots of places in my mind, and some of them probably will. Yeah.
I mean, Bill, does this not seem? I mean, it's I'm glad you're going through the field and highlighting some teams that might be able to surprise a little bit, whatever. But it just feels inevitable that this South Dakota State and North Dakota State rematch is the thing that's on the horizon, right? And the fact that they're in the same side of the bracket means it can't be the championship, right? But it does feel kind of like that's where we're headed, and that one of those two teams got a pretty good chance to win it all. As good as Montana State is, the thing about South Dakota State and North Dakota State is superior offensive line talent. I mean, Montana State has, one of my favorite small school offensive guards, in Marcus Ware, but the South Dakota State and North Dakota State, great offensive lines, decent defenses, great quarterback play. Yeah. That seems like the formula recently to, in FCS.
Right. I mean, Cam Miller's the guy that I wouldn't be shocked if he got a chance to go to Mobile. And one or two of those offensive linemen from each of those programs you just mentioned are also going to end up in Mobile. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I still feel like there'll be some upsets. And while they may not take out, one of those teams will take out the other, obviously, but I won't be surprised if we saw some new names, at least in other parts of the draw, make it to the Final Four. I guess is what I'm driving at. What say you, Greg, about teams that you are excited about and why in the upcoming FCS playoffs?
I just agree with what Will basically said here. It's going to end up being North Dakota State and South Dakota State, I think. It just seems inevitable. I'm interested to see what Tennessee State does against Montana, however.
There you go. It's always nice. It's always nice to see a little newish blood. And I hope more. We talked about this when we had Zach on. I'd like to see more HBCU programs take advantage of the opportunity to play in the FCS playoffs and or Division II playoffs, during which level, for two reasons. I mean, one is it dispels some of the misunderstandings I think people have about those programs and what they're capable of. And two, I think it will maybe not. I understand the fact they need to emphasize some of their, money winning or money. Some of those games are sort of cash cows, and some of those classics, your Orange Blossom Classic, your Bayou Classic, some of the other classics, Circle City and whatever, because you may not even break even on an FCS game, right? Especially if you're not the host. My understanding is that you pay obviously your travel expenses, and you pay and you get a percentage of what's collected, and often it's not enough to like I said, even break even. So I get why they don't they sometimes eschew the playoffs, but I'm glad to see at least one HBCU team with a chance to maybe make a little bit of noise.
Yeah.
Brock, Division II, Division III, FCS. Any of the ongoing playoffs you'd like to drop some information about or ask information about?
Yes. Who are some of your premier offensive linemen that you guys are going to see in this draft? I mean, you guys cover it way much more than I ever could. So I want to hear your thoughts, because I think big boys from that level always produce in the NFL when they get an opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll fire off an easy one because I'll let Will go deeper. But Carson Vincent recently accepted his invitation to go to the Senior Bowl, and two things I'll say about him: super high character kid, right? I mean, that's not that always matters. Well, it always matters. Let me rephrase that, but that's not always the deciding factor when it comes to certain things. But he's a terrific young man. But he's also a terrific football player, and I think that what he's accomplished in his Alabama A&M career, both in terms of consistency and leadership and all that good stuff, combined with the fact, and once again, we'll really get a chance to really see how athletic he is. I think he's more than athletic enough to hold up against whoever it is he faces when he gets to Mobile. But that's one that's sort of an easy, sort of a layup. I'll let Will have and maybe Greg split up some of the tougher ones. But I have a couple more I may toss into it.
Yeah, I got a couple for sure. I mean, to me, Charles Grant will be the highest drafted offensive lineman coming from somewhere below FBS. He's an offensive tackle at William & Mary. And other than Mike Tomlin, you don't often hear about William & Mary players. And actually Sean McDermott as well, right? You don't often hear about those guys in the NFL. But I think Charles Grant is just so long and smooth and has the size that normally you don't see at lower levels. I feel like that's a guy that he just seems like such a natural player at that position, which even some of the top guys took a while to get there. They were good athletes. They have good size. They have good length. And someone teaches them to have, better technique and footwork. But I feel like Charles Grant is a guy that's coming in with some advantages already because he's such a natural mover for someone that size. So that would be the first guy I would go to. Greg, how about you?
I would definitely agree with Mr. Grant. I would say David Walker from Central Arkansas.
Yep.
Oh, that's the edge rusher. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As well as another member of Central Arkansas's team, which is the safety Tamurian Wilson. He has a very good shot at getting drafted. I've got him as a 5th round pick right now.
Yeah, they always. I mean, I guess I get my hopes up every year that these teams, players from teams like that are going to get their shot in the NFL, and it's just often so disappointing. It's like, man, these guys just had a terrific career at the FCS or D2 or whatever, and then they got no opportunities. So sometimes it's about getting the opportunity. Another offensive lineman, since we were on that subject for a second, Marcus Ware. I mentioned him on the show before the last time I was here. He is a tackle/guard for Montana State. He's huge. I think he's 326 or 330 or something, but could be your move guard, like the guy that if you like to pull your guards and so on and so forth, he's nimble enough to do that at that size. I just feel like he's going to be playing on Sundays almost immediately. He reminds me a little bit of the McCormick, the guy that the Steelers drafted on day 3 this year, who's been starting for them for the last month and a half or whatever. Just comes in from a lower level, but has the capability to play right away.
Yeah, and there is a member of the Arkansas Pine Bluff contingents that I hope gets picked. Javoni Gibson. He has only played 1 year of football, but he's already got 937 receiving yards, so he'll go over 1,000 this week here. And he has really developed an explosive deep threat. And that's something that teams just really, really need. And I think he can provide that for them.
Right. And a few other guys.
I got a name for you, Bill. What do you make of Jackson Slater at Sacramento State?
Speaking of sons of people, he is sadly not as athletic as his father. But then who is? I think he'll get in a camp. I think he'll get in the camp, and if he can show he can play multiple positions at a high enough level, he'll hang around for a while. But yeah, that's tough. That's a tough burden to lift. Good Lord, was his father ridiculous? I'm going to throw out this is not a son, but a brother, Jared Penning the brother of Trevor Penning.
Sure.
Not quite as theatrical in terms of his approach to blocking as his brother, who, for those who went down to Mobile, saw him take a full heel turn in his time there. He clearly wanted to make a name for himself. He did a lot of sort of extra things. Yeah. I mean, I get it.
Nice way of putting it.
I get it. I mean, like he got some buzz, not all of it positive, but his brother is a similar player, similar athlete, maybe not quite as fast in a straight line, but maybe has slightly better bend than his brother. And once again, without the extra.
Well, speaking of brothers, someone that I had last year, that was one of my favorite offensive linemen he was below sleeper level. Most people did not know who he was. Tillin Grable, who went to the Buffalo Bills and showed very well for them. His brother, Ashton Grable, plays for Florida A&M.
Yes.
Ashton Grable, I think, is one of those cats because of COVID and the transfers and lower level that has an seemingly endless supply of eligibility. So he may not come out, even though I think this is his fifth year playing. But he's someone that, because of the connection and the success that his brother had, it seems to be like a not unrealistic possibility he would get a shot. And he's a good-looking guard prospect. I feel like if he's anything like his brother in terms of his athleticism, he's got a good shot. So that'll be an interesting name for me.
Yeah, no,
and
100% agreed. Yeah, 100% agreed.
And Gray Zabel from North Dakota State as well.
Yeah, I was going to throw that to Brock, because that was the thing he was talking about, these quote unquote these schools producing offensive linemen, but North Dakota State, South Dakota State, those guys are plug and play.
Correct. I'll throw another guy I think has a chance. Probably not quite as athletic as some of the guys you talked about, but Brandon Casey probably will end up being a right tackle. I mean, he's played right tackle. That's probably what he may even be kicked inside the guard, but he's another guy who can hold up in pass protection, but is, particularly suited to run blocking. A kid I've seen in person a couple of times is Hunter Zambrano from Illinois State.
100%.
He's a legit NFL prospect in my mind. And I'll throw out another guy, Jason Williams. In fact, if I had to pick outside of the big name guys we sort of opened up with, another guy that I think, I sort of had to stake my reputation on, hanging around for at least 5 or so years, Jason Williams from Youngstown State's another guy who's got bend and movement skills and light feet. I'd like to see him get more powerful. I'd like to see him get his hands on guys a little quicker. But those are, that's like buffing and polishing, right? I mean, the stuff is there. Like, he's got the things you want.
I'll throw out an Idaho Vandal out here as well. Keyshawn James Newby, the edge player from Idaho. He had 2 sacks against Oregon in week 1. He is in their week 1 game. He has a really awesome cross chop. And that is something that is not seen very much from some of these big boys either. But yeah, this young guy has the cross chop down to a science. So there's some players that we've got already here for you, Brock.
Yeah, there you go.
Get a head start.
The players more. Yeah, there's more guys going to be at camp. Like, he's going to get camp invite, but I think he's going to find a way to stick. And I don't think there's been a player drafted from the school in a few years, but Ryan Langsdale from Lafayette is maybe another guy that might be sort of a guard projection, depending on what you want him to be or what you look for in tackles. Probably not, quite the athlete you're looking for most teams looking for in tackles, but I think he hangs around for a few years. But he's had some impressive games, and they have one of the oldest and bitterest rivalries, Lehigh Lafayette, and
that's right.
Each one of the last few years, when I've watched him in that game multiple years, he's always been, in my mind, the most even year before when he saw eligibility left, I said, "Oh, this guy's the best pro prospect, on the field here from either team at any position." So yeah, he's a guy that I think has a chance to at least be in the league for a while.
Well, gentlemen, I leave you to discussing the players from below, from the NAIA, which I'm sure is next up on the show.
Well, we are getting close to the end for everybody. But before you go, Will, and obviously, once again, we thank you so much. I would like you to take this moment. And once again, you don't have to just plug your football stuff. If you've got other exciting artistic and cultural projects you're working on, feel free to let us know about those as well.
I am happy to say that I'm still contributing to the Steelers, the longest running Pittsburgh Steelers podcast in the world, the Pittsburgh Steeler Fury Show, which you can find anywhere podcasts are podcasted. But I'm also, you can find me on Twitter, the X, whatever you want to call it, Accidental Zen, on there. And then in real life, I'm working on a long-term project. I'm into year 5 now, doing a series of documentaries with an indigenous family here in America. They are what people would call Sioux. They call themselves Oglala. But we're doing a bunch of cultural and ceremonies and things for their kids, learning experiences, and something you just made a film recently for them that played on a ocean liner with a huge conference and so on and so forth. So that's always a big thing. And the Turkish horror film Shame that I worked on is not the best film I've ever worked on, but I think it's available on some platforms. So there you go. Movies galore.
Well, my girlfriend loves niche horror, so I will make sure that I make her aware of that. That is like one of her favorite things in the whole world. Once again,
it's a kitschy niche horror.
That
better.
You're just checking off. These are all boxes. You're checking off for it. Kitschy, love that. Just watched something called Thanksgiving recently, so yeah.
Well, yeah.
So she's fine
There's
with kitschy and
there's a Hanukkah horror movie that if you get a chance to see it is great.
What's the name of that one, Will?
I'm looking right now because I'm trying to remember. I think it's actually just called Hanukkah.
Oh, okay.
But it is if you like this kind of like genre horror films for the holidays, that's a winner.
So we're definitely not talking about 8 Crazy Nights. Not that way. Not about that way.
No.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, exactly. So at any rate, thank you, gentlemen. Also, you, Bill. Appreciate it. See you next time. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
The pleasure is always mine. Yes.
Okay. Night, y'all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too. Greg, did you want to fire off any more? We don't have to get into NAIA necessarily, but was any Division III or Division II players you wanted to touch on before we close out, or teams in the playoffs that you want to touch on before we close out?
No, I think we covered we covered those the playoffs pretty well here. I mean, we're going to see Ferris State, I think, in Division II win it all. I just, that is such a strong team. I don't know how they lost that one game that they did lose this year. I don't know what happened that week to them. I really don't. But it kind of reminds me of that NIU defeat that they handed Notre Dame. Yeah, kind of reminded me of that. Yeah. Never mind smiling down there the private pile. I don't.
Well, it was. Here's what I will say. Getting off to a slow start is one of those things that sometimes teams will do against teams that they don't think or maybe don't fully understand to be a threat. NIU played super hard. They got a couple of breaks, but most importantly, they did exploit, as good as Notre Dame's defense is, there's things that people just don't like to do, right? There's things that some parts of football are not fun. And NIU made them do the non-fun things more than they wanted to not do the fun stuff.
NIU's defense stymied the Notre Dame offense. I mean, that was just the bottom line. That was That was horrifying to watch Riley Leonard try to throw a football that week. That was, whoa.
It was not great. Anything you wanted to offer before we close this one out, Brock, as well?
No, just happy to wrap up another show, another holiday season. Thank you for everyone that's watching. We're having record numbers season 3. Enjoy another great slate of college football games because it's the last regular season day until next year, and I'm just going to enjoy it, all the teams, as much as I can.
Enjoy the game. Enjoy the game tomorrow that you're going to be covering there, Brock.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I will be on assignment. UNLV versus Nevada, battle for the Fremont Cannon, and of course, win and into the Mountain West title game for UNLV. So very exciting times in Las Vegas.
My Division III game of the week, for those that care at all, Hardin-Simmons versus Mary Hardin-Baylor. I think that's going to be a terrific football game. And Mary Hardin-Baylor has at least one player, once again, not drafted, but they have one player on defense who I do think will at least end up in a NFL camp and, have a puncher's chance to, hang around an NFL roster. Once again, everybody, I hope you got to spend time with your families. I hope you got a time to, I guess in the case of Brock, enjoy a couple of Thanksgiving meals. And anything worth doing is worth doing twice.
Could not agree more. My turkey will be sent into the group chat when finished. We are now in the slow cook era before we give it the nice high blast for the skin and let it rest. And then I shall show you gentlemen and the rest of everybody at Team MBS Media, potentially the internet, if it's not too bad, the final product of my turkey.
There we go.
See, now, I did not mention any of your cooking methods that you're using today because I used to do a real wild turkey in the oil, out in the backyard, right?
Yes. So the problem for me, Greg, is that I live in this thing called an apartment, and they kind of
I know.
almost lighting the complex on fire. So that's how I think I'll be able to.
I can't do that where I can't do that one where I'm living now either. But that used to be really, really good.
Right.
Yes. Oh, I saw it delicious. One day when I get a house, I'll invite you down. We'll have a turkey, and I bet the thing's gonna be delicious.
Oh yeah, it is awesome. Absolutely awesome. And tomorrow night I will be with Mr. Jeff Barnes hosting The Last Word.
Yes.
And then it's on to the conference championship games.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Well,
high drama, to say the least.
And then Brock and I, hopefully, maybe tomorrow-ish, we'll have an article where we're trying to figure out our idea. So I'm dividing mine into top dogs, underdogs, and I don't know. I haven't figured out what we'll call the third category of guys who might be considered for the Carolina coaching job, as Mac Brown was summarily shown the pasture, right? He was pointed out towards the clover where he can roam. But once again, everyone who has watched, everyone who has commented, and everyone who has participated, thank you so much for your talent, your time, and your attention. We will do this again because we will do this again. I mean, why wouldn't we do this again? It's one of the best parts of my week.
Subscribe, everybody. Like and subscribe.
It is. And yes, do that. Like and subscribe. And we are OUT out.